Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking's bi-weekly podcast. I'm here with Fine Woodworking Creative Director Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Special Projects Editor Matt Kenny.
Howdy, y'all.
And badass of all sorts, Jeff Rose.
Otherwise
Hello.
known as Camera Guy.
Camera guy.
Camera guy, keep doing your thing. That was one of the best. I'm your host, Ben Strano.
With a lowercase b.
If you have questions you'd like answered on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. Any links or articles we mention will be in this episode's show notes page, which can be found at shoptalklive.com. I'd like to take a brief moment and talk about some of the questions that we get. And they're all generally really, really good questions. Sometimes they're a little long. And if you're not necessarily okay with me shortening your question, you need to give a concise version. Most of the questions we get are, in email form, obviously, and tend to be, let's say, 100 to 200 words. And if you read that out loud to yourself and it feels long...
And you fall asleep before you're done.
So give us all of the information we need, and then maybe give us a shorter version. And we read the entirety of all the questions, and but then I always have to go and edit them just for entertainment's sake. I need to keep it brief so that we can keep things moving along, and that's all I'm asking of the listeners. Otherwise, it's up to me to do your edits. And if you don't like the way I do the edits...
Ben is a terrible editor. That's what it boils down to.
But I really, really, really do try and take the side of the listener and try and convey as much information as I can in an appropriate amount of time.
All of this sounds like you had edited a question to the dismay of a questioner in the past. I'm just saying. So.
But I'll say this, the key to good communication is brevity.
Yeah.
And often levity,
Yes.
but brevity.
Less talking is better communication for the most part.
Yeah.
Just ask Mike, who hasn't spoken to his wife in 10 years.
And we are happily married.
Great way to start a podcast.
They just communicate via Instagram.
That's right.
She didn't like my post today. Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
I must be in trouble for something.
Now, that said, I would also like to welcome any, if anyone wants to send in a video or a voice memo question, go for it. That's awesome. Keep it to less than a minute. Please, please, please. We don't need the part where you say, hey, I love the show, blah, blah, blah. Hope, just...
You may not need that part.
if you've got the ego inflating part, just send it directly to
Me.
Matt.
Yeah.
So we also set up a voicemail number that you can call in 203-304-3456. And it'll go straight to a voicemail. I have no idea whose outgoing message it is. I need to fix that before this episode goes out. It's probably somebody who worked here like 4 years ago. But again, that's 203-304-3456. Or you could just open up the voice memo app on your phone, take a quick voice message, and email it into shoptalk@taunton.com. So, yeah.
And keep it clean-ish.
I can bleep it out.
Yeah, but cleanish.
I also reserve the right to
Edit it
at my will.
into an outro.
Yes.
Into a song.
Yes, outros. They're coming back, people. All right. So, also want to announce that our very own Barry Dima will be at the Lee Nielsen Open House event, July 13th and 14th. And if you see him there, ask him about Random Orbit Sanders.
He'll be demoing them at Lee Nielsen Open House,
Yes.
I believe.
That poor guy has been testing Sanders for the past 6 weeks.
Yes,
Yeah.
But that's what he signed on for.
And wearing his little glove shoes.
Glove shoes.
His finger toes.
With Sanders?
I don't know.
I mean, that's a thorough test right
I
there.
know. Wearing those weird little shoes.
All right, now let's
All right.
talk
Get rid
about
of those
finger toe.
calluses.
Let's hit some questions. So the first question is from Derek. When I set a clamp on a jig or on glued faces, it causes them to twist or slip out of position. Sometimes it is easy to mitigate the problem with additional clamps or stops, but on small parts, I find it is difficult to place the stops. For instance, when I made Matt's grooving planes, while gluing the skate to the fence side, I found it difficult to locate the skate where I wanted because it would rotate as soon as I applied clamping pressure. When loosening it a little, I could get it back in position, but it would spin right back when tightened. I got around the issue by letting the glue set up for a bit with light clamping and then tap it into place before tightening down fully. Is there a better way? I'm a little
There are
confused by the last
several
part.
different things you could do to overcome that problem, but in my experience, I've noticed this. So I guess all clamps do this to some extent. The worst offenders are F-style clamps
And squishy clamps.
and squishy clamps, like quick clamps.
Yeah.
Those are the two worst offenders. Parallel jaw clamps do it almost not at all, in my experience, but they still do it a little
They can
bit.
go side to side.
Yes. Yeah, they can go side to side. So
He was using parallel jaw clamps,
he was using parallel jaw
which I
clamp.
edited out of the question.
Well, if I would have known that,
So you could. So if he's already using parallel jaw clamps, then so we can go from there. But if you're using F-style clamps, yeah, I mean they do it. And they do it bad. It can be really bad at times.
Well, because as you're tightening down, the actual pad
tends
spins.
to twist.
Yes.
It can't, even though it's loose, it does tend to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have found that, going back to, if anyone knows Bob Van Dyke, they've heard this mini rant about old style clamps.
Which one?
Yeah.
They're all very great rants, though. But
It's all a rant. I think is what you meant to say.
we love you, Bob. But the pad on like old Hartford clamps, they seem to spin more freely than modern day clamps, and I don't get that issue as much. I have like one Wentzlaw or whatever clamp, and that one when I don't need when I want something not to move, that's the one that I use.
I think I would probably say it has a lot to do with the fact that the threads on older clamps, they just tend to turn a lot easier. They don't sort of bind and crunch like newer threads on clamps can do. So it's all going to move. I mean, you're taking two parts, you're putting glue in between them, which is basically sort of like a friction-free sort of substance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always going to move. I find it will always, always, always move, and you just need to constrain it somehow. And Matt, on your planes, I remember when you were making those, basically it's 3 layers. It's 2 outer layers with a skate. And I saw you do that and go, oh my God, it would just like slip all over for me. And you said, that's because you're not me or something.
That sounds about right.
But I think it's always either during clamping or prior to clamping, I try to register the parts in some fashion. So for when I did the Krenov style plane with the 3 pieces, I did the College of the Redwoods technique where you make your blanks oversize, you drill holes through all the pieces, run a dowel through them as a registration device. So when you glue it up, they hold together.
They don't move. Yeah.
You can do that same technique if like you're
With
say-
drywall screws.
if you're attaching like stop blocks to a jig or something like that, and you screw it. And also things move when you try to screw it in place too. So in that case, you clamp it in place, screw it, unscrew it, glue it, screw it back in
Yeah.
place. There's a lot of ways to work around it. And something like panel glue up or something like that, you can sort of lock everything in place after the fact with clamping calls in strategic places. If it's a big panel, you can throw clamping calls across the top and bottom of the joint to physically align those parts as you're tightening them up. And if they squish a little bit left to right, no big deal because the part should be a little bit oversized anyway. But that's always a big challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah, I've always found that, like, if I were making grooving planes or something like that, I think I would put a lot of clamps on loosely and it's almost like tightening lug nuts on a tire or something like that. Just go around, tightening each one a little bit as I go. That's the only way that I can keep things from moving. I'm trying to remember the last thing I was making where I had to do this, but if I slowly tightened up a lot of clamps, it kind of kept any one of them from twisting the workpieces away from each other.
Yeah, I used 42 hand planes when I clamped up the grooving planes.
Hand 42 hand planes?
Hand clamps.
Yeah, I love it when you try and be a smartass. That happens.
So here are some other solutions. Like, for example, on those, I mean, I believe, I may not be absolutely correct about this, but I believe that the more glue you put on there, the more it's going to move. So one thing you can do is put less glue on. It doesn't need to be coming out like Niagara Falls when you put the clamps on, So on those grooving planes, I use just a minimum amount of glue, and that keeps it from sliding around. You can also let it tack up a little bit and then clamp. But also, like, some other things you can do, and maybe not on the grooving planes because they're so thin, but on larger glue ups, if you're trying to prevent this. And I got this from Greg Paolini when he was gluing false drawer fronts to drawers. Pop a few nails into one of the surfaces and clip off the head, little small brads, and clip off the head. And then when you press those things together, the nails register them and keep them in place, and they're hidden.
That's a great tip. I do use that. Yep.
Yeah. And so it depends on what you're making. You actually wouldn't want to put nails somewhere where you might cut into them later, or if they're going to be visible. So you could do that. And you can also find, like, I think he mentioned calls, right? No,
He mentioned stop blocks.
Stop blocks.
Mike mentioned calls.
Yeah, Mike. And yeah, so you can do that as well too. Instead of not just clamp down, but like also clamp. If you're doing like on the grooving planes, you got these pieces coming together. Don't just clamp them like a sandwich. Clamp them from side to side too, and that'll keep them from moving.
2 clamps laterally is going to hold it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, clamp them laterally as well as clamping top to bottom.
And the other thing, sort of along the lines of using less glue, is that if you ever do a rub joint, so you have a little block and you put glue on, you rub it back and forth until it creates this vacuum. The same can be true if you're trying to glue 2 parts together and you don't want them to squish around too much. A little bit of glue, sort of rub it back and forth until that you really thin out that layer of glue and it really starts to adhere. That's a good trick.
Yeah. Have either of you, because I know if we don't mention this, somebody's going to write in and ask, have either of you ever done the sprinkle a few grains of sand or salt between the joints? I've heard it many times, and it's always been like, you can do that. I've never done it.
Yeah, I used to do that for like edge gloss for panels.
Really? And it works?
Yeah.
Just remember, you got to put a little over your shoulder too.
Yeah. I think that's, I think that goes back a ways. That's kind of an old timer trick. And I've tried, it works. I wouldn't do it now just because I don't want to be introducing any sort of grit into the glue up process that I might hit with a hand plane later.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I mean, salt you would think dissolve?
And I would think salt might crush before it actually indents the wood, especially if you're like gluing up white oak boards or something like that.
Yeah. You can always,
if anyone does that with any regularity, let us know. I'm curious.
you can also, prior to the glue up, glue a piece of sandpaper to one half of it, and then glue them together, and the sandpaper will keep them from sliding around.
Yes.
I'm making an executive decision. I'm going to post a poll on the show notes of this episode about this. I want to know how everyone holds their pieces in place when clamping, and if anyone uses salt or sand especially.
One challenge I have a lot when I'm working with table saw or router jigs where you have stop blocks and you need to locate them exactly in the precise place in order to orient the workpiece when you're cutting a straight line on it or routing a profile on it. It can be kind of tough to do because sometimes it's hard to clamp. It's in the center of a piece of MDF or something like that. So I get them in place. I do a pencil line around them, lift them up, drill a hole from that face, through to the opposite face. So now we have holes in location where these pads or stops are going to go. Put the pads in place, you get the workpiece in place. I position them exactly where I want and wick CA glue around the borders of these blocks and hit it with some accelerator, and it locks them in place exactly where you want it. Then you can flip it over and screw from the opposite side through those screw holes that you just located, so you know you're putting screws in the right place. So the CA glue will eventually pop off, under a lot of pressure, but it holds it enough to where you can get screws in place without those screws shifting your block out of place.
All right, that brings up another question then. Has anyone done the thing where you use like PVA glue on the field of a glue up, if you will, and CA glue around the edges?
I just think that that's something someone says, but no one actually does it.
I've done it. I don't remember if it was successful or not.
I've never even heard of that.
I think like our friends at Fine Home Building might do it with door casings or something like that. Or
Well, there you go.
Another thing is hot melt glue works in the same way where you can temporarily hold something in place.
hot melt glue though is always so thick
Yeah.
that I feel like you're not getting wood to wood contact.
Well, I
feel
mean,
like
you hold it down, hot melt glue around the outside
the edge.
border,
Okay.
then you can attach it. But yeah.
that's a really good idea.
But that whole thing of, I
That would
got
work
yellow
with the
glue,
planes.
but now I'm also using hot melt to somehow clamp it in place, or CA glue. I think people make that up when they're writing articles on different uses for CA glue.
It's part of the
You're a one glue man. One glue at a time.
I don't know.
the CA deep state. It's all this hidden agenda.
They got to Anissa.
And
Yeah, because Anissa was not a fan of sitting there. They put the hit out on her.
Yeah.
Like, we'll show you.
They snuck in her shop
Capsalis.
and loosened up that cap. Let's move on to question number 2. This one is from Barry, possibly Demo, we're not sure. Whenever I cut dovetails, the wood fibers inside of the baseline always crush or tear out. I believe it is because the wood is not supported as I pare towards the center. Does it affect the strength of the joint?
No.
I mean, every dovetail I've ever cut. Now, granted, I'm not very good at this, but every dovetail I've ever cut, the baseline is all crushed on the inside.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Because the strength of the joint is not going to be from gluing face grain to end grain anyways, which is why, like Chris Bexford he recommends undercutting the inside part of the shoulder.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even affect the fit of the joint. It's all from long grain to long grain, and also just from the mechanical advantage of the joint. But it doesn't have. I don't think you have to always have crushed fibers.
Yeah, yes, you do.
if you route the waste away with a router, very smooth, you can pair, back with the chisel, get really, really close, hit your baseline on the top as you're pairing, and be maybe a 30-second out on the bottom to make sure you don't undercut. Flip it over, get your knife or your chisel in the scribe line, and pair back down the other way. And that way you want to make sure that you don't undercut the first way, obviously. So what you do is you sort of pair from the baseline, angle it out a little bit. So now you have a V shape, but it's more of a hump. And now you can go straight down at the tip of the hump, pairing straight down, watching how that migrates to each scribe line that you've already paired to, and you slowly work that sort of triangular pyramid way back flat until it's perfectly flat. It's a lot of work. I actually learned that from a Jim Kingshot video, who's like a fantastic English woodworker. And I did that for a while. It's a lot of work, because basically you just don't want anything sticking up. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's just that all of that effort is just for your own confidence.
And it's
because you're the only
yes.
one who knows that.
But
the fibers, yeah.
yes.
But also, I mean, the reason they're getting crushed is probably because it could be a combination of two things, or one of two things. Chisel isn't really sharp.
Yep.
Or B, you are wailing away at huge chunks of wood and try to remove them quickly.
Yes.
If you do, if either of those two things or both of the things are happening, that's why you're getting crushed fibers.
All right.
So which of the two are you doing?
Yes.
Yes.
No, but without throwing down a challenge, do you think that given something softer like pine or poplar that either one of you could, chopping away the waste?
Yes.
Yes.
Easy.
Yep. Because first of all,
Yes.
I'm gonna just
It's technique. It's not
it's
talent. It's just you just go about it a different way.
yeah. Because one, I learned to cut dovetails, and the guy that taught me to make furniture is absolutely. I love the guy, wonderful man, but we were chopping out waste with a chisel, and then the first time I did it with a coping saw, and then just paired to the baseline, I was like, well, why wouldn't you do this all the time? Because so if you're just wailing away on all this waste, that's part of the reason why you're going to get the. But if you cut out the waste and just leave a tiny little bit to pair, and in your chisel sharp, it doesn't matter what wood you're in, you can get a clean baseline.
Yeah, it can still sort of pop out depending how soft the wood is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like on softer woods, butternut or pine. Sometimes I do get a little heavy-handed.
All right, here
and
we go.
And I do expect, and it is, to Barry's point, it is sort of coming back the second way when that wood isn't as supported. And you do expect it to pop out.
Yeah.
But you want to be at least 1/8 of an inch below your good surface before it starts to pop. But sometimes in pine, because it's soft, that first time around, you're sort of just trying to go halfway, but you kind of go a little bit too far if it's a drawer side. And then you kind of come back around, and the first pop, it knocks everything out, and you might have like a 64th of an inch of scribe line before this big crater, right below it. It's like, and you put the joint together and you can't see. It's like, I just saved that. But yeah, you can get close. Just make sure nothing is sticking out. It can be perfectly flat. That's great. But undercutting like Chris Bexford does, like most of us do, just to ensure there's nothing to keep the joint from seating, that's the main thing. A little bit of tear out is not going to affect the glue surface. In fact, I always only put glue just on the pin sides because that's the only long grain to long grain glue surface in the joint. Is the only structurally sound glue surface. So don't kill yourself putting too much glue on everything.
Yeah. Second answer in a row. Less glue.
Yeah. And a
Proceed
1/2 inch
by
3
less
TPI
talking.
bandsaw blade, which is the other generic answer, which works. And
you're not sharp enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which we worked that in there too.
Every episode, it's got to be there.
Philip Morley. Bing. All right. All right. Let's talk about our all-time favorite tools of all time for this week.
Who's going to
Mike
go
and
first?
I take a drink. Matt goes first.
All right. So I just got done teaching a 5-day class at Peters Valley Craft School, and it was a class about making kumiko. And on the first day of class, so I told the students, I said beforehand they were told the only tools you need to bring are a 3/4 inch chisel.
If you say big chisel,
I said 3/4 inch because I didn't tell them big because 3/4 inch is a reasonable. You can get that reasonably well priced. A Dazuki and sharpening stones. And one guy showed up with none of those, but it was all right. So I think that my favorite tool of all time this week, I was going to say my 1-inch Lee Nielsen chisel.
You can't. That ship has sailed.
I'm going to say water stones.
All right.
It's somewhat generic, but because of how important sharpening is to accurate work, handwork in particular, you need to have good sharpening stones. And I love my sharpening stones. They are fantastic on A2 steel, and they cut quickly. They leave a good, the polishing stone leaves a good polish on A2 steel. Great, unbelievable on O1 steel, and does really great with PMV 11 as well. And so that's my favorite tool because it's the tool that you're always using. And it's really important. And so the students, I taught them how to sharpen a chisel on the first day, like flatten the back, maintain the primary bevel, hone a secondary bevel. And they all worked on their chisels during that day. And by mid-afternoon, they all had sharp chisels. It was fantastic. And then the rest of the class, I didn't have to sharpen any chisels. They could all go back and sharpen their chisels. Yeah, except for the guy that there's always someone that brings in a paint can opener. you know?
Yes.
And I'm just like, dude, there's nothing I can do with that.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, what if, he wanted to do all this work. And I was like, listen, this is like a $5 chisel and I am not going to spend my time fixing it. So, but yeah, a good set of sharpening stones is really important. And that's my favorite tool of all time this week.
Cool.
Yeah, I've since sold them, but I used to have a really expensive set of stones, and it was easy to justify that purchase because it affects all of my hand tools. So, I mean, every tool I used was upgraded when I got
Yes.
better at sharpening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, what one guy, I mean, I have a nice set of sharpening stones, right? This one guy is like a retired engineer or something, and it's time to sharpen, and he breaks out his Shapton glass stones. He doesn't have one or two or three. He's got like
all
a
of them.
collection.
Yes.
And the Shapton water pond
Cool. And the flattening plate.
in the flattening plate.
Yes.
Yes.
That's my man right there.
Yeah. He had it all. And then he pulled a man out of his bag, and that man sharpened all of his tools for him.
Did he have like the 16,000? What's it? Is there 32,000 as well or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure what stones he had, but yeah.
Cool. I had an answer. I changed my answer based on Matt's answer
water stones.
because I was teaching as well last week, and sharpening always comes up, and people bring their tools, and they're in various states of condition. And even though it was a 6-day class, we were going 9-10 hours a day, and there's just not time to really do any serious sharpening demos or spend a lot of time sharpening. Fortunately, Bob Van Dyke at Connecticut Valley has a good locker of really serviceably sharp hand planes and chisels. It's really nice. It's a nice luxury because someone comes in with something beyond repair. It's like, nah, go get a chisel. If we have a chance, we'll get to this. And the answer is we never do. So that being said, my favorite tool was one of my students came in with some new Veritas PMV 11 chisels. And okay, we can do this because they do a really, really good job of getting the back perfectly flat, which is the most labor-intensive part of sharpening a chisel. It's a little bit frosty looking, but it's still like flat, flat, flat. So I said, come here. We got to...
Sorry, when you say frosty looking, it's just not honed to the degree that you want. It's not polished.
It's just not polished.
They're still really flat with no big grind marks or anything.
Okay, gotcha.
So we said, okay, come here. I pulled out 8,000 grit Shapton stone, honing guide, locked it in place at the angle, boom, hit the bevel, 1,000, 8,000, flipped it, 8,000 only on the back to remove the burr. He's using a chisel like literally within a minute of buying a chisel and then using it. And that's like, oh, yeah, you can get other chisels and you can spend time getting them flat and sharp, and they're going to work just as well. But just that convenience, removing those stumbling blocks of getting a hand tool up and running the way it should be, I was very grateful for that. So thanks to the guys at Veritas for doing a good job on their chisels.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with my students, I talked about, and I said that when it comes to buying, I think hand tools in particular, and it's the reason why you spend more money on like a Lee Nielsen or a Veritas or a Blue Spruce or something like that is because when you get it, the back's flat, or it's good enough that you're not going to spend hours and hours and hours setting up a plane for use or a chisel for use. And there are many other reasons to get them as well, but it's just that type of thing, which is, and people balk at the price. I was like, no, that's worth it.
Yes.
Because who wants to spend an hour and a half flattening the back of a chisel?
Ben raises his hand.
Ben does.
You're absolutely right, but there are trade-offs that, like, I recently got a set of the Stanley Sweetheart chisels, and they're great. Chris Gochner uses them. They're fantastic. It's a trusted person who really swears by them. So I got them, and
Chris never swears.
True. But I think that the whole set probably costs as much as one PMV 11 chisel.
That's not quite accurate.
I don't think that's true.
High-end chisels are what, 60,
60, 70, $80.
Yeah. All right. So the whole set was, I think, $74.
Really? For
Yeah.
four?
For four.
For four. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And for me, where I am right now, and now also knowing what I know, having used good chisels,
Yeah.
knowing what the goal is, where I need to stop. I'm a little further along the journey than a beginner. And I would argue if a beginner could afford a Lie-Nielsen or a Veritas or whatever, that's what they should get. But if they can't, you can get a great chisel for not that much money, but you have to put the time and effort
Yeah,
into
it's one
it.
or the other.
And that's
Yep.
the trade-off.
Yeah.
For me, it was I have more time than money.
Yeah, all tools cost time, money, and exasperation.
Yeah.
And also more expensive chisels. There is a factor in terms of the steel, the forging, the tempering, the quality control. You're not just paying for how well it's sort of honed before you get there. Are other factors involved, but you're right. You can get anything sharp. One of my students came to class with a set of Japanese chisels, brand new. They were a more inexpensive set, but they would definitely be serviceable once you got them sharp. But again, what you're paying for that was sort of the fit and finish. There were heavier mill marks, and it would have taken a lot of work to get each one going. And I think that definitely would have been a stumbling block for that person. And he just kind of said, "What? It's going to take me half an hour per chisel. That's like way too much time." And I think he ended up returning those. So.
Yeah, it's everyone's got their own set of priorities.
Yeah.
And no one's right, but I will say that the backs,
disagree.
you
You can say there's more than one right answer.
Yeah.
I might disagree with that. But
no one's
not as
right for
him.
everyone else.
What?
So that's a longer way of saying there's no one right answer.
No,
But-
there's many right ways to do things in woodworking, but there are also some definitively wrong ways to do things in woodworking.
But for me, like
Well, I don't think there's any wrong ways. I think every method leads to a result. What is your intended result? And I would look to other woodworkers, and if their results are something I want to get to, however they got there is the right one,
valid.
and I'm going to give that a try.
So some guy came in and said he'd been resawing with a jigsaw.
Is it awesome?
No, it's not. It's a jigsaw.
Did it get him where he wanted to go? Yes.
I kind of want to see
Then
somebody
that's
try
awesome.
resawing with a jigsaw now. Curiosity has been
Just get yourself a 3 TPI blade on there.
That's
Half
right.
inch.
Yeah.
The backs of the Stanleys were relatively flat. There was one that it dipped right at the toe.
Dipped or raised? Like, could you not get flat at the toe?
I could not get flat at the very tip of the chisel. But again, having a little bit of experience now and not being afraid of a grinder either.
Ground it back.
It was like I could sit here for half an hour
Yes.
and grind this and with my plates until this back is flat, or I could bring it into work and grind that and lose an eighth of an inch and just move on with my life.
Yes, right.
So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah.
A good grinder makes it easy to fix cheap tools.
Yeah. Or use tools that have been really beat.
Yeah.
Because that's the first thing you see is that rounded over back. Forget it. The chisel's not going to work until you get it flat. Cool.
All right, my all-time favorite tool of all time for this week is I have cheap chisels, but I have a very expensive hatchet.
You got to stop calling them cheap chisels because that's a normative judgment. Anyways,
They were inexpensive.
they're
Inexpensive
inexpensive.
chisels.
Is your hatchet inexpensive?
No.
No.
But my Gransforth Brooks Swedish Carving Axe, it's just one of those tools that once you get used to it, once you get used to the weight and everything about it, it's this beefy 2-pound hatchet that you would think would be hard to carve a spoon with or would not be good for delicate work. But that weight just is in all the right places. It's easy to use. The mass just helps you get through the cut. And I can't use anything but it
It's
now.
a hatchet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hatchet.
It's a
Yeah.
maul. That's what Mike calls everything. The maul.
Do you have a problem with the hatchet?
That's a hatchet.
It's a hatchet. Good hatchets.
So are
nice,
you saying like, oh, they're all the same?
I'm just giving you a hard time. That's what I'm
Okay.
doing. Yeah. Probably mostly out of jealousy because like, dang, I want a good hatchet. I don't even know what that is, but like I know what that is, and I want
It's
one
cool.
of those. Yes.
Yeah.
I bought one time I was at Liberty Tool in Liberty, Maine, and I found an really old hatchet head. And it was on a kind of a crummy handle, but actually the handle was really comfortable and nice, but it was already starting to split.
Right.
And that, because it was really good, for hand forged iron. Oh my gosh, it was unbelievable. That was such a nice. And then the handle broke, and
You threw away the head because it's like it's no good anymore. Without a handle.
no, I still have the head. I just haven't made a new handle for it.
That's a fun task in and of itself, rehandling something. That's not fun.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I had a head. I think it was like full size. Like it should have like that big old long thing, like for
It's called a
splitting wood.
handle.
But I put one on like size
Get too
for.
technical.
But it's called a handle.
So I put a short handle on size for like a smaller head.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just like this massive handheld little bang. I use it for when I'm making dowels or pins before, you split the wood to get the grain aligned and everything.
You arrive at Mount.
Yeah. So I use that. I got my dowel splitting hatchet
Nice.
in the corner of my shop, and the
You need to go a little basket maker's fro now.
head's really loose.
Do they make basket makers for Rose?
Curtis Buchanan had one at Greenwood Fest. Yeah, it was just a little teeny tiny thing. It was so cute.
Yeah. That's slippery slope.
Yeah.
Speaking of cool things made from iron that cut, you know what I got this past weekend? Made by a blacksmith.
Oh, your little herb chopper.
An herb chopper. Oh, I
you
used
kidding
it
me?
last night. It was so sweet. It was awesome. It's beautiful.
You got
first
a
of all.
blacksmith made
Yes, herb chopper.
is that what they're called? Herb chopper?
Yeah.
So it's like a pastry knife but curved or
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like that. Kind of looks like an axe head a
Okay.
little bit, but more like a blade that then it comes up and the tail becomes the handle.
Flips around.
ooh.
It's really sweet. It's beautiful.
Have you not posted that to Instagram yet, man? That's gold.
It's gold on Instagram. I might do that. Oh, it's so nice. I cut up some fresh basil and oregano last night for a pizza. That
All
was
right.
great.
I agree. Makes a fantastic pizza.
Just our listening audience knows he held up the two fingers like the Italiano. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we
Yeah.
come back, we're
You
gonna
probably should.
we're gonna dig into some hand plane questions. Make sure you check out Rough Cut with Fine Woodworking, sponsored in part by Felder Group and SCM. Season 8 is airing now on PBS and brings unique design inspiration and easy-to-follow project instructions to woodworkers at every skill level. Check your local listings or visit finewoodworking.tv to watch now.
Cue the fireworks. Fine Woodworking's 4th of July sale is on now. You can save 20% site-wide on all your favorite project plans, DVDs, and books, including Matt Kenny's best-selling 52 Boxes in 52 Weeks. Head to tauntonstore.com and use code SUMMER20 to start saving now.
Let's take a question from Frederick. I've been hand planing a Douglas fir laminated top, and I'm finding that I have to manually remove shavings that are stuck between the blade and the mouth every 2 or 3 passes. Most of the time that requires removing the lever cap. This happens both with my number 5 jack and my low angle number 7 jointer. Is my blade too close to the mouth? It's currently at about 1/16 of an inch. Should I move the frog back?
It's definitely not too close. A 16th of an inch opening at the mouth is actually pretty chunky.
Yeah, but if your shavings are 1/16 of an inch plus, I think that's where we might be running into problems here.
Yeah, so a 16th of an inch opening will let a 16th of an inch pass through no problem,
Yeah.
right?
Give or take.
I was assuming that the guy wasn't taking 16th inch shavings because that's a hefty shaving, which probably is not really feasible.
Yeah, I think it's all relative. You just match the opening of the throat to your desired, slightly greater than the desired thickness of shaving you would like to take, ideally. So
Yeah.
that'd be my first thing.
But a couple of things here. I wonder. So he says that he's having to remove the lever cap and take the. I guess he's having to take the lever cap out and pull the
blade
plane out.
Right.
So one thing I've noticed with softwoods, in particular, but really anytime you take a really light shaving, they almost get to have like static cling to them. And I wonder if that's all it is. It's just this stuff is kind of sticky.
He might have sent this question in the middle of winter.
I don't know if you've ever seen that. I've had that experience where like shavings they're kind of like they're sticky, and
I've had a pile of shavings just stick to my hand.
Yeah, and so that could be an issue. But I wonder if they're also maybe getting stuck because of his cap iron location.
I was thinking not necessarily location, but if his cap iron is not flat.
If there's a space between the cap iron and the back of the blade,
The chip breaker or the
the
cap
chip
iron?
breaker.
Yeah.
Sorry, the chip
yeah.
breaker. Yeah. Then shavings can get stuck that way too.
I was thinking about that, but he says number 5 jack. So yeah, I'm thinking your chip breaker, it might not be seated well.
Oh,
but then he
low
says you got the problem with the low angle number 7 jointer, which does not have a chip breaker.
I think it's just. I mean, we don't know specifically how they're getting stuck in the mouth area of the
Yeah.
plane.
Move on. No, we don't know.
So that wasn't something you edited out.
I would say, yeah, check the mouth. I mean, if you're taking really, really heavy shavings, open up the mouth.
And stop taking really heavy shavings.
Also, like Douglas fir from a big box store is difficult to work.
Well, Douglas fir in particular gets. I use Douglas fir a lot, and it gets that static, clingy stickiness to it. And I wonder if that's all it is.
And also, it's a laminated top, so they no way all the grains run in the same direction with every
Right.
strip. So
He's stacking the odds against
yeah,
himself.
so
here.
if you're going against the grain on a Doug fir, and that tear out, that could be the thing that's like
Yes.
clogging up your throat. I'm going to say that. Because that's going to end up with something much thicker than just the shaving itself.
Okay.
Especially on Doug fir, you go against the grain hand planing. Not only does you get chip out, but oftentimes it'll continue to pull out with the grain.
Yeah.
So it dives down into a deeper shaving, and it just kind of pulls that all out.
Yeah.
And you get these big, deep tear outs. And
Right.
then that thing could be getting
Yeah,
stuck.
like this giant splinter sliver thing.
Yes.
So lighten up the blade, open up the throat, and try tackling this thing more like a 45-degree angle. You're going to get less tear out that way, and also give any potential tear a little bit more room to get on out of there.
So basically, but change the plane setup for this task.
Yeah.
saying.
Yes.
Because I mean it's a big job. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And you could always try a blacksmith made herb chopper.
Yeah.
What would Philip Morley do?
Run it through a time saver.
All right, let's move on to a question from Martin. And he asks, I recently purchased 2 planes, a Bedrock 603 and a Bedrock 605.
Cool.
Now, that is basically a number 3 and a number 5, right? Just
I think
Yes.
it's a bedrock.
It's a bedrock number 3 and a
6
bedrock number 5.
Yeah.
okay.
We're
yeah.
talking at least a $100 plus difference for each plane. Between
Sure, but for, when we're talking plane size, we're talking about a number 3 and a number 5.
Yes.
Yes.
Camera can't pick up the eye rolling that's going on over here. If I bought some rough milled wood, can I get it smooth and level using only the hand planes? Or is a planer still necessary? If a planer is necessary, is a jointer a co-necessity? Financially, I can only shell out for 1 indulgence per year.
I love this question, how it just immediately rolls downhill. Can I do it with just planes? But, okay, could I get a machine, or actually do I need 2 machines? And I can only get like 1 machine. It's like, you're ready to pull the trigger on something, my friend.
He's itching. He's been listening to Mike.
Okay, so you only have money for 1 machine, buy a jointer, because that's more expensive. Now, sell
No.
your 603 and
This is-
60.
Buy a joiner because you use a joiner first.
No, I have more.
Okay.
So now you got your joiner.
It ends with a domino.
Now you sell your 603 and 605 and buy a benchtop planer. and then just sort of, get along with life until you can afford another hand plane.
Make a bunch of cutting boards, sell them at the craft fair, and then go buy hand planes.
Okay, so your first question, can you do it? Yeah, you can do it. You can do anything with hand tools. I think that's what it comes down to. You can make anything you want with just hand tools.
Yeah.
You cannot make anything you want with just power tools. You just can't get to that final result. However, you can speed up a lot of processes that hand tools can do slowly with machines that can do it quickly. So can you be a hand tool only woodworker? Absolutely. Can you be a power tool only woodworker? Yeah, with a compromise. If you don't want to go beyond a certain point in what you're making, you can do that. So, yeah, you can smooth and level with anything.
Yeah, it's just a lot of it will depend on the size of what you're trying to smooth and level. Because number 5 isn't terribly long.
Yeah.
And the longer the plane, the better it does with longer wood. Yeah. So you can flatten, say, an 8-foot board with a number 5.
You got to be. It's not automatic.
You can flatten it with a Sloyd knife too if you have enough time and patience.
Yes.
But
or your hatchet. Can you do that with
your
the
hatchet?
Dave Fisher probably could.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at least you're ready. If your plane ever crashes in the mountains, you'll have your hatchet.
They don't let me carry my hatchet on.
Yeah. Well, it would be a small plane. Just like the book. Hatchet, the book.
So second question.
Say it again.
The book.
So if a planer's necessary, is a jointer a co-necessity? So now it comes by, okay, now if I'm buying one tool, am I starting with a benchtop planer or a jointer?
Benchtop planer. No ands, ifs, or buts in my head.
What would be the first thing I bought?
Well, because, like if you look at Vic Teslin's method where it's like use a hand plane to get it flat enough to run it through a planer.
Got it. So you got your number 5. That's going to, a little bit of sweat, but you're going to be able to get any board flat enough to run the opposite face up through a planer to get that flat, then you flip it and then you clean it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like if you have one hand plane and a planer, you can do this in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of value.
Yeah. And the other thing a jointer does is it can joint an edge straight and square. Your number 5 can do that too.
Yeah. As long as you can. Yeah. That's taking a little bit more skill.
But you can
do the equation. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's an interesting approach, I guess. Because really, you can just go to the cup side and flatten, depending on how thick it is, like a 4/4 board, you might only need to flatten the 1.5 inches on either edge of the board and make sure they're straight and flat, and then run that through the planer.
Right. Or get a long piece of MDF, put your board on top, get some wedges in there, hot melt glue until the board is nice and stable and isn't going to flatten out underneath the pressure of the planer, run that through and flip it. So,
yeah.
Yeah, planer first, I guess. Yeah. It's cheaper. But, yeah.
It's definitely cheaper. And I think you get more bang for your buck. And then also, it's like when I got a planer, that was when my woodworking kicked up a level because not everything I made was 3/4 of an inch thick.
Right, you can vary the
Whereas
thickness.
If
of
I
parts.
only had a joiner, everything was still going to be 3/4 of an inch thick.
Yeah.
So,
so I'd throw a bandsaw in there too, though.
Yeah, need a bandsaw.
At least 20 inch.
Might as well get a table saw.
Yeah.
Get a bandsaw.
Or you could just CNC it all.
Oh, you could. I wouldn't go there. That's not woodworking.
Oh.
One thing I saw this past weekend while teaching, because it's a craft school, there's all these different crafts going on, and I know a woman that works there, and she showed me some jewelry she had made, and it's these tiny little round like pendants for a necklace, and the inside there is like laser cut wood that it's all these different it's almost like marquetry, but it's tiny and it goes together, and then there's like little holes in it. She sends thread through the holes, and it's like amazing. And she used a laser cutter.
That's not woodworking.
It's not, but it's jewelry making. It's pretty amazing.
All right, let's read some listener comments. First one is from Gordy on findwoodworking.com. And he says, today I started a special project for my granddaughter's wedding gift. I had purchased black walnut, 8/4 to dimension, to 3/4 inch width, bookended for correct height. Sorry. I resawed the 8/4 and I was not surprised, but pleased when the pieces cupped.
But not pleased.
But not pleased. Sorry, I was not surprised, but not pleased when the pieces cupped, and I didn't have a lot of thickness to play with, to plane it out and maintain 3/4 of an inch thick. But I remembered Mike sharing to go to the convex side, as it turns out, instead of what would be the more obvious concave side. I ran the boards through the planer, addressing the convex side, and the tension relieved, allowing the board to flatten within specs on one pass. Thanks, and I will keep listening and hopefully learning.
See, we will edit your long questions.
But your comments, I'm going to let it roll.
Your long compliments, we'll read those until the cows come home.
As long as they're about Mike, not about you.
I'm glad that works. I've never actually tried it.
Oh. All right. And on YouTube, in reference to Shop Talk Live 165 from Liam.
Oh, you got to read his whole name because he's like a Charles Dickens character.
Liam Rickerby.
So is the next guy, Brian Scudney.
Yeah.
They're both like Dickens characters.
Do you just want to make fun of every name
I'm not
first?
making fun of their names. It's awesome.
Yeah, because like they haven't heard that before ever in their
They
lives.
probably haven't.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Read what
Sorry,
Liam had to
Liam.
say.
I would always recommend
Brian.
keeping a push stick at the bandsaw too, because we were talking about push sticks.
Yeah.
Especially for small parts. I had the misfortune to be stupid cutting through a small piece of oak. The last part of the oak cut through a lot quicker than the first, resulting in my thumb diving 1/2 inch into the blade.
Yeah. Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen the Tim Rousseau has the push stick in the bandsaw, like in the miter slot
Yes.
of his bandsaw?
Yep.
It just
I've
lives
seen
there.
that. Yes.
Just
Yeah.
a little stick.
I feel you, Liam. That my only injury on a machine was at the bandsaw. I was actually flicking away little waste from the blade, and it's actually my thumb. Same thing. Your thumb doesn't offer any resistance to cutting. It's like it just goes in. It isn't like you hit the blade and you pull back. It just goes all the way through.
Well,
It just keeps going.
bandsaws are in butcher shops for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry to hear it. Sounds like you made it out okay with some stitches. That's great. Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. Be safe, people. And Brian Scudney, after 5 stitches in my index finger, I learned my lesson with a chisel. I could get a clamp, but I'm almost done. And there he goes.
That sounds
Yep.
like early.
Yeah.
Brian did not learn his lesson.
Well, and on iTunes, we have a 5-star review from Damon. Great podcast. I binged all of the episodes over the course of a few months, and then I went crazy. And then I started the whole thing over again. The information is great, and the guys are fun to listen to. Thank you. And
Thank you,
the
Damon.
5-star reviews really do help. We appreciate them. They get us on the top of iTunes or whatever, and thank you for that. All right, we have a recommendation. I like that people are starting to send in recommendations. From Barry Krenner. Wrap the threads of a jar with plumber's Teflon tape to keep it from sticking to shellac and finish. I think that's...
But it is important. One thing he notes here is that you, just like when you apply plumber's tape when you're doing fittings, you have to apply it in the correct direction so that when you tighten it, it doesn't come undone.
Working in a hardware store, I've had to explain that like 58 million times.
And he mentions that. He says in a clockwise direction.
Yep.
And I know that, and I take care to like figure out the right way to do it, and it's always wrong the first time. I wish someone would have said clockwise. It's like, oh, was that looking at it, or that's from its point of view?
At the fitting, clockwise.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense.
No one ever gives the threads their, considers things from their point of view.
That's what I'm saying.
No one ever does. And it's really unfortunate.
All right. I have a recommendation, and it is to just go to a woodworking event somewhere. It doesn't have to be Fine Woodworking Live. I went to Greenwood Fest this past weekend. It was awesome. It's just awesome to see. I've been to WIA. I've been to Fine Woodworking Live. I've been to Greenwood Fest. I've been to Handworks. I've been to Lee Nielsen Open House. It's awesome to see woodworkers hanging out and just talk and shop. It's great. It's something that we take for granted here because we get to do it all the time. And I love watching people just geek out with each other about woodworking. Go be around people as insane as yourself. That's my recommendation. Anybody else?
I have one. You should always have a pocket knife in your pocket.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It's the only thing that really kills a tick. You just cut them right in half.
It is tick season, man.
It is tick season. Always have it. You can always, every day, there's a reason I pull out my pocket knife and use it every single day.
Huh.
Yep. Mike?
That's good. Trim the ends of your flux brushes for glue. Trim them down to like a 1/4 inch, maybe 5/16. Actually, 5/16. 3/8 is too long, 1/4 is too short. 5/16 of an inch. I just use a chisel.
Do you have a jig for that?
No.
No. He wraps blue tape around the bristles, though, first, and then he cuts them.
David Duyard, by the way, David Duyard sent me a picture of, it was a class doing a box chair, and somebody wove the seat in blue tape.
Awesome.
It was great. Yeah, I'll forward it on.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, I interrupted. All right. Okay. So that's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have questions you'd like us to answer on the show, please send them in to shoptalk@taunton.com, or you can call in. I'll post the number on the website, or send us in your videos or whatever. Let's get a little bit more interactive, if you will.
Right on.
If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. Somebody keeps telling me I need to say that earlier in the episode when people are actually listening. Sorry.
Like in the first 30 seconds.
When they accidentally clicked on it. All right. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
Speaking of cool things made from iron that cut, you know what I got this past weekend? Made by a blacksmith? An herb chopper. Oh, I used it last night. It was so sweet. It was awesome. I made pizza, and it was olive oil, bacon, red pepper, fresh mozz, and then fresh oregano and basil. God, that was good. And, I bought some 16-year-old scotch last night. I think it was called Aberfour or Aberlour. Oh, my God. You think Macallan's 12 is good. This stuff was unbelievable. God, that was good.